Um, the topic I chose today is how to honor your parents. So I thought, given we've obviously got Shavuot coming up, I wanted to focus on one of the Ten Commandments. And I think we all obviously learn the Ten Commandments as young children or beginning as young children. We continue learning them, but I think sometimes we forget to revisit them. And one of the commandments that I want to revisit is to honor your father and mother. So I'll just bring up the source sheet. So we've got honor your father and mother. And I think this is something that might get lost to us a bit, is that you may long endure on the land that your God is assigning to you. So i.e. that you'll live a long life. It seems like there's a reference as well to the land of Israel, which is interesting. And I want to really delve into this. So note, it doesn't say fear, it doesn't say love, it says honor. So we have to think about what that actually means to honor our parents. And I think if we look at the Shulchan Aruch in the next source, Shulchan Aruch Yehodeah, we can begin to unpack this and to understand what this honor is talking about. So it gives a few practical examples. So it says that one may take great care concerning his father's and mother's honor and fear. So now it talks about fear. This is the first time also references fear. So clearly the Shulchan Aruch takes that the honor included in the Ten Commandments is also referencing fear. It then asks, what is fear? And it says, he shall not stand in the place designated for him, i.e. don't take your father. And obviously it's usually referring in the Shulchan Aruch to the father, but obviously we can take it as being synonymous with the mother as well. So don't stand in the father's place. And don't stand in his place designated that he should daven, or that he should sit in the place designated for him to recline in his home. So don't sit in his favorite chair, right? Usually mums and dads have favorite chairs in the house. Don't sit in that. Or maybe the seat around the table, nor refute his words, nor contradict his words in his presence, even to say father's words appear to be, right? So don't contradict him. Don't tell him or her that they're wrong. And I think this is one that's interesting in 2024, where unfortunately as a teacher, I see this, when parents come for parent-teacher interviews, I often sort of react with a little bit of shock that some kids call their parents by their first name. And this is actually something that we see is against halakha. It says, don't call your mother or father by their first name. And even it says neither in life nor in death. So even once they're no longer in this world, we still have to have that sort of respect and honor for their name. And we shouldn't even call them their first name then. There has to be a separate. And I think when we think about, the relationship that we have with a mother and father at any age, it doesn't matter what age they are. There has to be some sort of a separation. They're not our friend. They're not our mate. And if we start calling them by their first name or a nickname, then it can suddenly become a bit too much of a friend-like relationship. And I think the Shulchan Aruch is recognizing here that even something small, which is not actually small, by calling your father or your mother by their first name is actually really important to not do. And it actually outlines this. And it goes on to say, had his father's name been like the name of others, he changes them. So even if someone else was called, Abba or Tati, you should change their name so that you're calling your father something different. And then it talks about, so what is honor? So we talked about what is fear. Now let's talk about what is honor. So he feeds him and gives him drink, dresses and undresses him. And again, this obviously as well applies to the mother, brings him in and takes him out. So obviously there's this sort of caring for the person in sickness and in health. But I think this is a crucial point that I want to bring out, and does so with a pleasant face. For even if he feeds him delicacies every day, yet does so with a scowl, punishment will befall him. So i.e. that you've done everything you can for your parents. You've served them. You've provided every meal for them. You've cleaned up after them. But you do so with a look on your face like, oh, I don't want to be here. I can't be bothered. I don't want to do this. And they can tell that is against halakha. The halakha is actually saying that you have to have a happy face. You have to have a smile on your face when you're doing it. And I think we have to think about why. Why does it have to be done with positivity? And I think when we all think about the relationship that we have with our parents, And or the relationship on the inverse that we have with our children, when our parents ask us to do something for them, when we ask our children to do something for us, the way that we respond at that very moment is how you show them dignity and honor. When your parents ask you to bring them something, it's not you bringing something that shows them the honor and respect or the fear. The honor is shown in the way you respond. It's saying, yeah, of course, I'll go do that straight away. If you say, oh, can I come back in 5 minutes? Oh, I'm busy right now. And then you go do it, it's obviously not the same thing. And to me, it's amazing that the Shulchan Aruch, obviously written over 500 years ago, is picking up these sort of emotional cues that we hold as so important in today's society. But even over 500 years ago, the Shulchan Aruch is picking up the importance of these things. And I think obviously some things have changed. For example, even the language we use about fathers and mothers has changed somewhat since this Shulchan Aruch was written. But I think something that hasn't changed is this idea. In the moment, we have to be respectful, and we have to honor our parents by simply doing what they ask in a way that's through positivity and through happiness. And if we show any sort of burden when they ask us to do something, it obviously gives to them the message that we don't care about them, that we're not honoring them, and that's not what the right thing is to do according to Shulchan Aruch. If we then move on to the Mishnah Torah, I found this a fascinating piece, and again, I think something that unfortunately applies as well in 2024. If one's mother or father has become mentally disordered, he should make an effort to behave to them according to their state of mind until they will be shown mercy and get cured. So to me, this is fascinating. I think if we unpack what this is saying, it's saying that let's pretend, God forbid, that our parents are nuts, right? I think as teenagers, we all think our parents are nuts. And then usually we become adults and we realize maybe our parents weren't so nuts after all. And then maybe we even become parents ourselves and we realize they certainly weren't nuts and we're actually the same as them. And we think very similarly to them. But I think at some point in our lives, we all think our parents are a bit nuts and a bit crazy. And unfortunately, as we know as well, this can also be a reality as sometimes parents, grow old and grow very old. They can obviously become unwell, and that can include their mental health too. And I think what the Mishnah Torah, what Rambam's saying here, is that regardless of the state your parents are in, even if you think your parents are nuts, and even if they actually are nuts, you actually have to pretend they're normal. Now, why are you doing this? Why? The question is why? Why are we, making effectively like a Truman Show to pretend everything's good? Everything is good, parents. Don't worry, you guys are fine. You're not nuts. Why are we pretending that they're normal? And I think the answer is that we don't want to embarrass them. And even when our parents are old, even when we think our parents are doing the wrong thing, they're still our parents. And of course, the Rambam's not saying here that we should, allow them to encourage us to do things that are dangerous or unsafe or damaging for our own health. But when it's, meaningless in the sense that nothing's going to come out of telling them that they've done something, that they're thinking in a wrong way, or that they've done something wrong, he's saying just keep them in a normal state of mind, keep them sane, and keep them from being embarrassed, that they shouldn't know, that they're not in a regular state of mind. And it seems to be, he's saying, until they get cured, or this is at least my interpretation, he's saying that the way that they'll get cured from this sort of false mindset is actually by you treating them with love and not embarrassing them. So that's the Mishnah Torah. If we then come to the next source, Vayikra, so it repeats the source. It repeats the Ten Commandment here about honoring your parents, except it uses a different word here. It says here, you shall each revere your mother and father and keep my Shabbats. I am Hashem, your God, right? So we know that obviously Shabbat is one of the most important mitzvot. And it's saying here that the reverence, the fear, the honor that we have for a mother and father, that is equal to Shabbat. So the question is, why? Why is this so important? And I guess before we can answer that, what is this? We've now changed the wording a little bit. We've said revere, right? So if we go back, we had honor. We've now got revere, which to me, implies more of a fear. So if we go back to the Shulchan Aruch continues from our previous source. It goes here. To what extent is there fear? Right. So, what extent do you actually have to fear your son, to fear your parents? Sorry. Had the son been dressed beautifully, sitting at the head of the community, and his father and mother came and ripped his clothes, hit him on his head, and spat on him, he should not shame them, but rather remain silent and fear the King of Kings who so commanded him. So we've got a son who's become, let's say, the head of the Kehillah, the prime minister of the country. He's sitting on his throne. He's sitting on his chair. The whole community is honoring him. He's dressed beautifully. And his mother and father come and embarrass him to no end, right? Literally physically hit him and shame him, right? Now, of course, we would expect that a son or daughter, in this case, would react with horror, would react with shock, and would react with anger. I think all of us in this situation would. Yet the Shulchan Aruch is actually saying that we're commanding you to stay silent. And again, just like there's a parallel here to the Mishnah Torah from the Rambam, where there's an expectation of silence and of just holding space for your parents. Even if, you can imagine what kind of parents, we can't imagine what kind of parents would do this to their own child. Yet the Shulchan Aruch is saying, even in this case, right, you just have to stay silent. I think firstly, the Torah is perhaps acknowledging that parents can be deeply embarrassing sometimes, and they can really, again, I think there's a natural inclination when we're teenagers, when we're young, to find our parents deeply embarrassing. But I think the Torah is saying here that even sometimes when we're adults, even when we're grown, our parents can be, and we have to be so careful about how we respond to that embarrassment. If we go to our next source, and this is obviously a very famous quote from the Torah, where Hashem says to Abraham, "Go forth, lech lecha me'artzecha, go forth from your native land and from your father's house to the land that I will show you." I brought this source in to question when do we not have to honor our parents? When do we not have to listen to? Or honor maybe is the wrong word. When do we not have to be commanded to listen to our parents? Right? Because Hashem is clearly telling Abraham that you don't actually have to follow your father's footsteps, your father's lifestyle here. He's actually telling him to go do the opposite, right? To leave his father's house. And I think it's an important question to unpack when are we actually allowed to do that? So if we look at the Talmud Kedushin, when a person honors his father and mother, the Holy One, blessed be he, says, I ascribe credit to them as if I dwelt between them, and they honor me as well, right? So we can see that honor is amazing. To honor your parents is the highest thing we can do. So again, we come back to why Abraham was allowed to leave his father's house. And I think when we think about this question, I think the answer is that it's when their path is not one that is built on love and respect for us, and is not a path that is actually going to keep us sustained and healthy. And obviously we know that Abraham was not living in a place where he could be a good Jew and a good servant of Hashem. And that's why Hashem's telling him that you actually need to leave. So I think we see that while the Torah says, even when your parents are embarrassing you, and even when you think your parents are crazy, you don't have to, you have to stay silent and you can't rebuke them. There is a point where you can actually ignore their advice and you don't have to listen to them. And we see that with Abraham. If we go back to our first source, right? If we go back to the fifth commandment, honor your father and mother, I have one more question to answer. And it seems like we have this second part that we haven't really unpacked yet. And that says that you may long endure on the land that Hashem is assigning you. It seems here that we have a reward for the mitzvah. It seems here that we're saying, honor your father and mother so that we receive a long life, so that you receive a long life and you can live a long time. The question is, firstly, why is there this seemingly reward? And why do we need a reward? Shouldn't we just have to honor our parents, right? Shouldn't it just be obvious that we should honor our parents? They're the people who have given life to us. They're, the most godlike thing we have in our immediate lives as parents who have created us. Isn't it obvious that we need to to honor them, and like we don't need an incentive for this. So the Or HaChaim comments on this. It says so that your days will be long, etc. And it says the expression Ya'arichon applies that this will be a natural consequence. It is not a reward by God. Had it been intended as a reward, the Torah would have to write something like, I will lengthen your life, etc. The Torah may have taught us that the miraculous feature which attends performance of honoring father and mother is that persons doing so will enjoy long life. There are several commandments which are associated with miraculous phenomena. In all such cases, this is not part of the reward for performing them. And this is a really, really deep idea that I just want to unpack for a second. And I think the Torah is recognizing the importance of the relationship with Hashem. It's not saying honor your parents so that you receive a good life and a long life. It's saying that, yes, sometimes it is going to be extremely challenging and difficult to honor your parents. But they're the ones who, if we are able to have a positive relationship with them, where our soul and our neshama is able to be nourished. And it's only by doing this that we receive, or these ingredients have the recipe of a long life. We're not doing this to receive a long life, but rather by doing this, the natural consequence is that we receive a long life. And I think, I just want to end with this quote, Kol mitzvah, every commandment which I, Hashem, command you to this day, you shall observe and do. And I think we know that every commandment, every mitzvah from the 613 of the Torah is important. But I think one that sustains us throughout our lives is the commandment to honor our parents. And of course, some of us are lucky enough to have our parents alive, and some of us, unfortunately, our parents are in the next world. But regardless, we still honor our parents, and it talked about this in the Shulchan Aruch, whether they're in this world or in the next world. And that honor continues throughout our lives. And I think to end, we know that as a young father myself, and as someone who's watching friends and people around them have their own children, I think the idea of honoring your parents is more pertinent than ever when you're a young parent yourself, because our children pick up on all of these cues. And our children, when they see their grandparents being honored by us, the recipe is obviously so clear to them, and the imitation is so clear to them. And I think this, out of all the commandments in the Torah, is one of the most important, because it's something that we can do each and every day. And I think this Shavuot, it's a nice mitzvah to think about. So thanks all for listening, and I'll finish there.